Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. When the earthquake struck, I was crushed while trying to save my boyfriend, Lucas, and ended up paralyzed from the neck down. But instead of staying by my side, he turned around and married my foster sister, Lily, the epitome of a sweet-talking backstabber. While they walked hand in hand into their happily ever after, I was left in the care of a psychotic nurse who tortured me until I died. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn back to the very day of the earthquake. This time, when Lucas begged me desperately to save him, I turned around and walked away without hesitation. Let him die. Summer, save me. Lucas's cries echoed in my ears as I snapped back to reality. He was trapped, his legs pinned beneath heavy rubble. Around me, the sound of collapsing buildings and crumbling walls reminded me of the nightmare I had just escaped. I had been given a second chance, a chance to rewrite everything in my past life. I had recklessly thrown myself into the ruins to save Lucas, shielding him with my body just as the concrete slabs came crashing down. I ended up severely paralyzed while Lucas escaped with only minor injuries. He had even knelt by my hospital bed, swearing to stay with me forever. Yet not long after, he married Lily. My parents, once heartbroken for me, gradually shifted their attention to her, lavishing her with the love and care that should have been mine. Abandoned, I was left to rot in misery until my untimely death. Summer, please. I'm begging you. Lucas's desperate cries grew fainter as I turned my back on him and sprinted toward safety. Without me to shield him, how could he possibly escape unscathed? Let him fend for himself. When I saw Lucas again, he was lying in a hospital bed with a critical condition notice hanging over him. After several emergency surgeries, he survived, but just barely. His legs had been shattered and amputated, his face disfigured beyond recognition, and his prognosis of a potential vegetative state was grim. Hearing this, I nearly laughed out loud but managed to restrain myself. Fighting heartbreak, I wept bitterly at his bedside, playing the role of a devoted girlfriend to perfection. I even contacted his parents, urging them to help transfer him to a better hospital in the city for his recovery. His parents, devastated by his condition, fainted several times upon seeing him. They hired the best doctors they could afford, but the outcome remained the same. Lucas was now unable to walk, let alone have children. Even his reproductive organs had been irreparably damaged in the collapse. Hearing this, his father nearly fainted again. Lucas was their only son, the sole heir to the family line. With him incapacitated, the family faced the end of their bloodline. That very night, his parents began looking into surrogacy options, a reaction I was all too familiar with. People grieve, yes, but not forever. Eventually, they move on and seek new forms of solace. In my previous life, my parents had similarly replaced me with Lily. Initially, they showed little sign of their disappointment. But as time went on, they openly embraced her as their perfect daughter. Smart, charming, and obedient, everything they wanted in a child. They handed her the love, the privilege, and even the life that had once been mine. At first, I didn't blame Lily, but as her provocations and schemes grew bolder, I saw her for what she truly was. She would visit me in the hospital only to leave in tears, telling others not to blame me because it was my own fault for being so unlikable. She would flaunt her relationship with Lucas, forcing me to look at their intimate photos, delighting in my despair. Lucas, the man I had risked my life to save, allowed all of this to happen, even orchestrating some of it. It was he who had introduced Lily to my parents, urging them to take her in as their own. But this time, things would be different. I would expose every secret, every betrayal. After leaving the hospital, I drove home. My parents, relieved to see me safe, welcomed me back with open arms. Like Lucas, I was their only child. Without me, Lily would never have had the chance to replace me. Dad, Lucas may be crippled, but I don't want to abandon him. I'll take care of him until he wakes up, I said, watching as my father's expression softened with approval. That's my girl, he said, his pride evident in his eyes. I was the daughter who could do no wrong. Brilliant, capable, and his greatest accomplishment. But I knew better. To him, pride was irreplaceable, but the person who gave him that pride didn't necessarily have to be me. A month passed, and Lucas still hadn't woken up. I visited him daily, playing the role of a devoted caregiver, while secretly basking in his parents' gratitude. They showered me with gifts, which I accepted without hesitation, but I wasn't doing this for free. One day, I took his parents to an orphanage. "Uncle, Aunt, why not consider adoption?" I suggested earnestly. They froze, staring at me in shock. I could see the mix of emotions in their eyes: confusion, hesitation, and maybe even relief. I knew what they were thinking. Their attempts at surrogacy had failed, and age was no longer on their side. Adoption seemed like their only viable option, especially since Lucas's distant relatives were already eyeing the family's wealth. Better to bring in an obedient child than let the vultures take over. "Please don't say no," I added, my voice sincere. "I don't just represent myself, I also represent Lucas. Lucas has always been a filial son. How could he bear to let you two grow old in loneliness with no one to care for you?" With renewed eyes, I held Mr. and Mrs. Liu's hands and led them into the orphanage. Though they hesitated, their eyes were quickly drawn to a group of lively, adorable children, their gazes softening with affection and anticipation. The words of refusal they initially mumbled were swallowed back, and before long, they were discussing which child seemed the most obedient and well-mannered. After a morning of careful consideration, they left the orphanage with a folder full of documents, looking quite satisfied. It didn't take long for them to finalize their decision. They adopted a 6-year-old boy and renamed him Luke, a name that symbolized a divine gift. They even held a grand adoption ceremony, inviting numerous influential families to celebrate. During the banquet, some guests whispered snide remarks about how heartless Mr. and Mrs. Liu were, accusing them of thinking about adopting a stranger while their son hadn't even passed away yet. I immediately stood up and rebuked them. "Enough. You don't know anything." This was entirely my suggestion. As Lucas's girlfriend, it's my duty to fulfill his filial responsibilities in his absence. Seeing uncle and aunt in so much pain breaks my heart. Rather than let them continue to grieve, why not bring a child into their lives to help them heal? If Lucas wakes up, I'm sure he'll support my decision. I spoke with conviction and authority, my words resonating with the crowd. Mr. and Mrs. Liu were visibly moved, their eyes welling up with tears as they nodded in agreement with my assurance. The adoption process went smoothly. As we left the venue, Mrs. Liu held my hand and stuffed several sets of keys and property deeds into my arms, together worth an unimaginable fortune. On the way home, something unexpected happened. A girl suddenly darted out onto the road, stopping our car. The driver slammed the brakes, causing me and my parents to lurch forward violently. Once we steadied ourselves, I stepped out of the car and froze when I saw the girl. Her youthful yet vaguely familiar face brought a smile to my lips. "Lily. Long time no see." The moment Lily saw me, her eyes widened in disbelief and she stammered, "Summer, what are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be paralyzed?" Her words made our driver, Uncle Wang, frown. He waved her away, muttering about crazy people blocking cars and spouting curses. But Lily wasn't about to give up. She broke free from Uncle Wang's grip, ran to the car, and pounded on the windows. "Dad. Mom. It's me, Lily, your foster daughter. Don't you recognize me? Please come out and see me." My parents, utterly bewildered by her erratic behavior, exchanged confused looks. My mother quickly pulled me back into the car, whispering, "Summer, let's go. She's clearly unhinged." Lily, hearing this, was devastated. Tears streamed down her face as she collapsed onto the ground, frantically recounting memories of the happy times she claimed to have shared with my parents. But her desperation only earned her a single word from my mother: crazy. In my past life, Lily had been adored and pampered by my mother, treated like a precious gem. She had never faced such rejection or humiliation. Even as our car sped away, I could still hear her heart-wrenching sobs fading into the distance. This incident barely registered with my parents, who simply dismissed her as a lunatic. But I understood perfectly. Lily had also been reborn like me. She remembered everything from our past lives. Based on the timeline, she should have been meeting my parents for the first time with Lucas's help, but now with Lucas bedridden and no one to connect her to my family, she was panicking, desperate enough to throw herself in front of our car. A few days later, the investigation report on Lucas and Lily landed on my desk, a thick stack of papers detailing their clandestine relationship. It turned out the two of them had been involved for over 2 years. He a wealthy young entrepreneur. She a diligent and delicate white lotus. It didn't take long for them to fall for each other. At the time, Lucas was still dating me, pretending to be the perfect boyfriend while secretly betraying me. He had planned to replace me with Lily, but her background as a poor student made her an unfit match for the Liu family. That's why, in my past life, after I became paralyzed, he wasted no time positioning Lily as my substitute, using the excuse of filial piety to justify her presence in my parents' lives. What amused me most was learning that a year before the earthquake, Lucas had already been grooming Lily to imitate my behavior, even having her replicate my business ideas and strategies. Looking at the evidence, I realized that even without the earthquake, Lucas would have found a way to eliminate me, either through accidents or other schemes to ensure Lily took my place. But I wasn't in a hurry to expose them. Revenge was best served cold, and I had plenty of time to make them pay for everything I had endured in my past life. Half a month later, news came from the hospital. Lucas had woken up. At the time, I was at the Liu residence, enjoying tea with Mrs. Liu and playing with Luke. When Mrs. Liu heard the news, her expression was a mixture of surprise and guilt. She clutched Luke tightly, unable to speak for a long moment. After all, everyone had assumed Lucas would remain in a vegetative state for the rest of his life. No one expected him to wake up. "Auntie, don't worry," I said with a calm smile. "Lucas is a filial son. He'll understand your decisions. And look at Luke, he's so adorable and well-behaved. I'm sure Lucas will love him too. Don't worry about a thing, I'll handle it." With my reassurance, Mrs. Liu finally left for the hospital. But the scene in Lucas's hospital room was even more chaotic than I had anticipated. The moment Lucas learned about the adoption, he went berserk, throwing anything within reach, his pale face twisted with rage, his voice hoarse from shouting, "You're all monsters. I'm not even dead yet, and you've already brought in a little bastard to replace me. The Liu family is mine, and no one's taking it from me." Lucas's outburst terrified Mr. and Mrs. Liu, especially little Luke, who had just been formally introduced to them. Despite his young age and visible fear, the boy bravely stood his ground, positioning his small body in front of his adoptive parents. "Don't be scared, Mom and Dad. I'll protect you," he declared. In that moment, Mr. and Mrs. Liu were moved to tears. Without hesitation, they gave Lucas a few quick words, and then left with Luke, back straight and determined, leaving no room for further argument. Lucas was utterly stunned, unable to comprehend how this newly adopted boy could so quickly replace him. The reason was simple. Luke was a prodigy. His natural talents were overwhelming. Not only did he pick up languages effortlessly, mastering conversational English in a matter of months, but he also excelled in the arts. At the adoption ceremony, his impromptu piano performance earned him high praise from a renowned music teacher, who even offered to take him on as a student. Academically, Luke was exceptional, understanding fifth-grade material, while still in elementary school, and consistently scoring perfect marks on tests. He had already become the darling of the elite circles, a small genius everyone admired. In contrast, Lucas had become nothing more than a source of disappointment, a crippled man who lashed out at everyone around him. His behavior only magnified the stark difference between him and Luke, who brought pride and joy to the Liu family. "Lucas, can't you show some understanding? Do you know how many tears your parents have shed for you? How much pain they've endured?" I said, my tone heavy with disappointment as I leveled my gaze at him. "They've suffered enough. If they hadn't adopted Luke, they might not have made it. Do you want to drive them to their deaths?" My words were sharp and unrelenting, and before he could respond, I slammed the door and walked out. Moments later, Lucas's furious screams erupted from the hospital room. I stood in the hallway, closing my eyes to savor the moment, a sense of relief washing over me. Don't blame me for being heartless. Everything I was doing now was exactly what Lucas had done to me in our past life. When I woke up paralyzed in my hospital bed, back then I found my parents and Lily sitting together, laughing and chatting like a happy family while I lay there like a forgotten stranger. Lucas, instead of offering comfort, berated me for being ungrateful and narrow-minded, accusing me of driving my parents to despair by refusing to accept Lily. No one listened to me, and Lucas even dragged my parents away, leaving me alone to calm down. At least Lucas could still move his upper body. Now in my past life, I had been completely paralyzed, unable to do anything but blink and speak. My suffering had been far greater than his. After I left, Lucas continued his tantrums for days. Initially, Mr. and Mrs. Liu were sympathetic, but his constant outbursts and his cruel insults toward Luke wore them down. Eventually, they stopped visiting the hospital altogether, claiming it was to give him time to reflect. They even instructed the nurses to refuse visitors, fearing Lucas's behavior would tarnish the family's reputation. I was the only exception. Having already integrated myself deeply into the Liu family, I was too trusted to be excluded. Not only did Mr. and Mrs. Liu treat me like their daughter, but Luke also adored me, calling me sister every chance he got. One day, Mrs. Liu, you held my hand and said, "Summer, once this storm passes, I want to officially adopt you as my goddaughter. You're such a good child. We're all so grateful for you." She didn't need to say the rest aloud. We both knew what she meant. With Lucas's condition, he would never marry or have a family. As a socialite from a wealthy family, it was unthinkable for me to spend my life tied to him. By becoming their goddaughter, I could maintain my ties to the Liu family without unnecessary complications. Over the next few days, I continued my routine visits to Lucas's hospital room. Each time, I would deliver a sharp critique, condemning his selfishness and lack of perspective. I didn't linger, always leaving after making my point, but my words took their toll. Lucas eventually broke, and in his desperation, he bribed a nurse to contact Lily. His beloved Lily rushed to the hospital as soon as she got the news. When she saw Lucas, disfigured and crippled, she gasped, covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. "Lucas, what happened to you? Don't scare me like this," she cried. She hadn't expected this outcome. In her mind, Lucas should have been saved, protected by my selfless sacrifice. When Lucas explained what had happened, she froze, her mind racing to piece everything together. Then, in a trembling voice, she recounted her own memories of our past life, confessing that she too had been reborn. The two of them spent hours going over everything, their resentment toward me growing with each revelation. In the end, they reached the same conclusion. Their suffering was my fault. If I hadn't been so selfish, if I had just sacrificed myself to save Lucas, none of this would have happened. They vowed to take revenge, to reclaim everything they believed I had stolen from them. Watching this scene unfold on the hospital surveillance footage, I couldn't help but laugh. Truly, a scumbag and a manipulative woman were a perfect match, shameless to the core. Lucas soon began his next move. He adopted a new demeanor, shedding his previous anger and hostility. When I visited, he even managed to smile at me, as if trying to pretend that nothing had happened. But I wasn't fooled. Seeing Lucas like this, Mr. and Mrs. Liu eventually softened, and began visiting the hospital frequently, often accompanied by their precious adopted son, Luke. Like most proud parents, they couldn't help but boast about their child's achievements. Every visit started with polite inquiries about Lucas's condition, but quickly veered into praise for Luke. "Lucas, you wouldn't believe it," Mr. Liu began one day, beaming with pride. "Luke got first place on his exams again yesterday, and when we got home, he even cooked dinner for us. Don't worry, son. When Luke grows up, he'll make something of himself and take good care of you." Each time, Lucas's face turned pale then red, his teeth clenched so hard it seemed they might crack. Outwardly, he nodded and praised Luke along with them, but inside he was seething with hatred, wishing he could swallow Luke whole. After enduring this for a month, Lucas finally snapped one day. He couldn't hold back any longer and blurted out his demand. "Mom, Dad, I want to marry Summer." The room fell silent. Lucas, sensing the tension, quickly added, "I know I'm a mess and that I don't deserve her, but I love her. She loves me too. I know Summer would never abandon me." When no one immediately responded, Lucas gritted his teeth and threatened, "If you don't agree, I'll kill myself." Spotting me entering the room, he lunged forward, grabbing my hand and dragging me closer. "Summer, Let's go get our marriage license. I've already picked the date. His outburst drew a crowd outside the door. Onlookers began whispering, pointing fingers, and even live streaming the scene. Some muttered that Lucas had been injured while saving me, hinting that if I refused to marry him, I would be ungrateful and heartless. Lucas upped the drama, pulling out a knife and pressing it to his neck. Summer, he declared, tears streaming down his face. I saved you willingly. I won't force you, but I won't live with this shame. I'll end it now. The spectacle escalated. The crowd turned on me, shouting accusations. How heartless can she be? He saved her life. What's wrong with marrying him? He's a hero. The situation spiraled out of control. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Mr. Liu suddenly stormed forward, snatching the knife from Lucas's hands. Enough, he bellowed. Your mother and I have already adopted Summer as our goddaughter. From now on, your siblings have one father and one mother. Stop this nonsense. Mr. Liu's words silenced the crowd, and Mrs. Liu, who had remained quiet until now, delivered the final blow. Lucas, you're not just crippled. You've also lost your ability to have children. Marrying Summer would ruin her life. Who would want to be a widow for the rest of their days? The crowd gasped. The realization spread like wildfire. Wait, he can't, someone whispered. Then what's the point? Marrying him would be a waste. Voices shifted from sympathy to mockery. His parents are amazing, though, saving that girl from a life of misery. Good for them. Lucas's face turned dark as coal. His fists clenched, his rage so furious it was almost laughable. But the humiliation wasn't over. Being publicly shamed, especially on such a personal topic, was unbearable for anyone, let alone Lucas, who prided himself on his masculinity. And worst of all, the person who revealed it was none other than his own mother. Before he could recover, another person stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. Fine, don't marry him, but he saved your life, didn't he? At least split your family's fortune with him. It's the least you can do. Lucas, catching my eye, smirked smugly. He clearly thought his plan was working. Banking on the lack of surveillance during the earthquake, he had spun a tale of heroism, hoping to guilt me into submission. Even if I denied it, he figured the court of public opinion would side with him. Either way, he had nothing to lose. But before I could respond, the doors burst open. A group of reporters rushed in. Cameras flashed as they bombarded me with questions. Joe, can we interview you? You risked your life multiple times to save over 10 trapped victims in the disaster zone. What are your thoughts? Joe, the nation is calling you a hero. Will you attend the upcoming award ceremony? The room fell into stunned silence. A curious reporter, noticing the confusion, turned on a nearby TV. Every channel was running the same story. Headlines read, Young woman bravely rescues over 10 victims. Heroine from prominent family praised for selflessness. Corporate Aries risks all for others. Photos and videos accompanied the news, showing me darting through the rubble, navigating the chaos with precision, and carrying injured victims to safety. The footage, though grainy, left no doubt it was me, covered in blood and dust. I worked tirelessly until the rescue teams arrived. Then, without seeking recognition, I disappeared. The room's attention shifted to Lucas. Everyone stared at him, their expressions a mix of pity and disdain. It didn't take a genius to realize I hadn't needed saving. Lucas's claims crumbled under the weight of the evidence. He stammered, his face pale. Maybe I remembered it wrong. The crowd erupted into laughter and murmurs. Mr. and Mrs. Liu looked ready to collapse from embarrassment, their disappointment palpable. On the drive home, none of us said a word. I unlocked my phone, and just as I expected, the internet was ablaze with criticism and mockery directed at Lucas. The events in the hospital room had been live-streamed, but while Lucas's hired people had cut the feed when things turned sour, mine had not. I had even invested in extra bandwidth to ensure this moment was recorded and shared widely. Yes, I had known about Lucas's schemes all along. The hospital room was under surveillance, and today's drama reversal had been entirely within my expectations. Mr. and Mrs. Liu siding with me was inevitable. Our close relationship played a part, but what sealed the deal was me revealing Lucas's betrayal. He had secretly sold classified company documents to competitors as part of his plan to retaliate against his parents. With such treachery uncovered, the Laos were livid enough to want to disown him entirely. As for the earthquake rescue, it was all true. After leaving Lucas behind, I had been heartbroken as I witnessed the devastation. The shattered walls, the cries of the injured. It reminded me of the suffering I had endured in my past life, and I couldn't stand idly by. I wanted to save them. Armed with my knowledge of the terrain from my past life and my decent physical condition, I threw myself into rescue efforts. Even though I was injured along the way, I persevered. I couldn't bear to let others experience the same pain I once had. After the rescue, I quietly left, not out of altruism, but because I wanted the credit to come at the most opportune moment, like earlier today. As for Lily, she was currently sitting in a police station, waiting for someone to bail her. Lucas had personally chosen her to steal confidential L Corporation documents. Mr. Liu, enraged beyond words, had already instructed his lawyers to reject any settlement offers. Lily's actions carried serious legal consequences, and even if her trial didn't lead to a conviction, prison time was still a possibility. But I wasn't particularly concerned with her fate at the moment. I had too much on my plate. Over the next few days, I was swamped with interviews from television networks and media outlets, filming official programs and managing company affairs. My heroic deeds had caused my family's company stocks to soar, reaching unprecedented heights. My father, already preparing for retirement, accelerated his plans to hand over the company to me. Meanwhile, my mother basked in the limelight, attending events and proudly listening to everyone praise me, her smile practically glowing. Mr. Liu, as a gesture of gratitude, reclaimed the shares Lucas held, and gifted a portion of them to me under the guise of a goddaughter's inheritance. Everything was falling perfectly into place. Then, out of the blue, news came from the detention center. Lily was pregnant. At first, this seemed irrelevant, but she claimed the child belonged to Lucas. Shocked and panicked, Mr. and Mrs. Liu rushed to verify the claim. According to the doctor's diagnosis, Lily was 4 months pregnant, with the fetus developing normally for months just before the earthquake. Initially, the Laos were skeptical, but Lily presented what she called undeniable evidence. Photos, messages, and other proof of her relationship with Lucas. Her certainty began to sway them. When Lucas heard the news, his entire demeanor changed. For the first time in weeks, he found a spark of energy, insisting on caring for Lily despite his injuries. It didn't take a genius to see the truth. The two had been involved for a long time. A paternity test was almost unnecessary when the results confirmed the child was Lucas's. Mr. and Mrs. Liu were both astonished and elated. This child was now the Liu family's only heir, their last hope to continue the family line. Overnight, Lily's status skyrocketed. She was no longer just an accomplice but a mother carrying the Liu family's future. Her arrogance grew along with her position. She began making excessive demands, first insisting on moving into a luxurious mansion, then acquiring designer clothes and bags. If she was even slightly dissatisfied, she would threaten to harm herself and the baby. Mr. and Mrs. Liu, though resentful, swallowed their anger for the sake of the unborn child. But Lily wasn't satisfied. She wanted marriage, not just a simple union but a grand wedding to solidify her place in the family. This put Mr. and Mrs. Liu in an impossible position. Marriage meant officially accepting Lily as a daughter-in-law, making her a permanent member of the family. The timing, however, was disastrous. Everyone knew I had been Lucas's girlfriend, and the timeline of Lily's pregnancy clearly showed that Lucas had cheated on me. Publicly acknowledging Lily as part of the family would tarnish the L name beyond repair, especially with my current fame and reputation. It would be a PR disaster. The LS tried to delay the matter, hoping to find a solution, but Lily was impatient. Having experienced hardship before, she wasn't about to let this opportunity slip through her fingers. When the LS hesitated, she took matters into her own hands, posting intimate photos of herself and Lucas online, accompanied by the caption, "True love endures all. Countdown to our wedding." By the time the LS discovered the posts, it was too late. The internet had exploded. Users dug up her medical records, ultrasound photos, and even pre-earthquake videos of her and Lucas acting intimately. The evidence of Lucas's infidelity was irrefutable. The public backlash was swift and brutal, with scathing comments flooding in from all sides. But none of it fazed Lucas or Lily. Both were rotten to the core and had nothing left to lose. Lily even responded to the criticism brazenly, saying, "A mistress, the unloved one, is the real third party. Love doesn't follow any rules about who came first. We'll be happy together." Because of Lucas and Lily's rash actions, Mr. and Mrs. Liu nearly fainted from anger. But in the end, after weighing their options, they begrudgingly agreed to Lily's demands. They knew they'd face public backlash and that it would negatively impact the company. But none of that mattered compared to their precious grandchild. They were willing to sacrifice everything for the baby. Their concessions didn't stop there. They even went so far as to reclaim the shares they had gifted me and planned to send Luke back to the orphanage. I could overlook most things, but I refused to let them abandon Luke. After everything, I fought hard to convince them to change their minds, but they held firm, clinging to the importance of blood ties. They insisted that they had only adopted Luke because they thought they had no heirs, but now that they had a biological grandson on the way, there was no need for an outsider. I laughed bitterly at their audacity. Seeing no point in further argument, I took Luke home with me. My parents, with their newfound free time after handing the company over to me, were more than happy to welcome Luke into our family. Meanwhile, the Liu family stocks plummeted due to Mr. Liu's selfish decisions, and the company's internal divisions grew sharper. The board members criticized him for prioritizing personal matters over his responsibilities as chairman. His relatives saw an opportunity and began poaching key personnel. In contrast, my career soared. The public's outrage toward Lucas and Lily only fueled their support for me, with countless people rooting for my success. A week later, Lucas and Lily's wedding took place. Despite the lavish arrangements and significant expense, the guest list was pitifully short. No one wanted to tarnish their reputation by attending the wedding of a known cheater and a mistress. Rumor had it that in the event, Lily smashed a jade bracelet worth millions out of frustration while Lucas messaged me in a fit of rage. "Summer, was this your doing? Are you that happy to see me humiliated? Let me tell you, I will never love you. One day I'll make you pay." I couldn't help but laugh and replied, "There's a fine line between dreaming and delusion. Use that mouth of yours for something better, or go see a doctor for your brain. Either way, I'm done here." After that, I blocked and deleted him. 2 months later, I received news that Lily had miscarried. The fetus's heartbeat suddenly stopped, and despite efforts to save it, the baby couldn't be revived. Mr. and Mrs. Liu were devastated. They had thrown away their dignity and alienated so many people for the sake of this child, only for everything to end in vain. The company's upper management had grown so fed up with their actions that they were nearly driven out of the boardroom entirely. Frustrated and broken, they started spinning conspiracy theories, accusing me of sabotage. I immediately called the police to investigate. The results, of course, proved my innocence. The hospital confirmed that the baby's genetic abnormalities were the cause, something that couldn't have been prevented or blamed on anyone. The louse fell apart after this. Both were so enraged and heartbroken that they ended up hospitalized. By the time they were discharged, they found that the company was no longer theirs. Mr. Liu's cousins had taken advantage of the chaos to consolidate power, stripping him of his position as chairman. The stress aged the louse overnight. Things didn't improve for Lucas and Lily either. After losing the baby, Lucas spiraled into madness, alternating between verbally abusing and physically assaulting Lily. Their constant fighting became a spectacle, further disillusioning the louse. Eventually, Mr. and Mrs. Liu left a sum of money for them and disappeared entirely. Lily, now flush with cash, became even more reckless. She hired a caretaker for Lucas, a sadistic individual who, in my past life, had tormented me to death. Then she abandoned him completely. It didn't take long for Lucas to meet the same fate I once had. The caretaker tortured him until he died, his body covered in horrifying injuries. He had begged Lily for help multiple times, but she ignored his pleas, calling him weak and difficult. When Lucas's body was finally discovered, the caretaker was arrested, and Lily's involvement was investigated. Lily didn't last much longer after the miscarriage. Her mental state deteriorated. She turned to gambling and drugs, eventually overdosing and dying in her home. Her death shocked no one. When the louse finally reappeared, it was to arrange Lucas and Lily's funerals. This time, they didn't rush off afterward. Instead, they came to visit me, or rather Luke. With both their son and grandson gone, they had turned their attention back to the child they once abandoned, but they were too late. "Didn't you hear? Luke's biological parents found him," I said. "Their faces pale. He's the youngest son of Asia's richest man. He was lost as a child and ended up in the orphanage by accident." After saying this, I didn't forget to show Mr. and Mrs. Liu the latest news reports. Youngest son of Asia's richest man found. Adopted by a kind stranger. Unbelievable fate. A fortune invested in gratitude for the Z family. Good deeds lead to prosperity. The unstoppable rise of Summer Su. The headlines were dazzling, and it wasn't hard to see the regret dawning on Mr. and Mrs. Liu's faces. They had lost a golden opportunity. If they hadn't abandoned Luke, his biological parents, grateful for their care, would have undoubtedly repaid them generously, just as they were doing for me now. But it was too late. All they could do was offer some insincere compliments about how good deeds lead to blessings before hastily taking their leave. Watching their retreating figures, I smiled. I was never a purely kind-hearted person. I had known about Luke's true identity from the start. In my previous life, I had seen the news about how the youngest son of Asia's wealthiest man had been found in an orphanage, only to be tragically murdered by an enemy. His death had been horrifyingly cruel. This time, I was determined to seize every opportunity. It was no coincidence that I led Mr. and Mrs. Liu to the orphanage where Luke lived, or that I urged the director to introduce Luke. In particular, I had done my homework. Luke had lost his memory when he first arrived at the orphanage, but his intelligence and charm were undeniable. Mr. and Mrs. Liu were always going to choose him, but their selfishness ruined everything. For the sake of a biological grandson, they abandoned Luke without hesitation, giving me the perfect excuse to take him in. They missed their chance. They had no one to blame but themselves. Lily's pregnancy wasn't a surprise either. In my past life, she had also been pregnant, but due to genetic issues, the baby hadn't survived. This time, history repeated itself. I had even indirectly let Lily know that Mr. and Mrs. Liu planned to cast her aside once the baby was born, which prompted her desperate decision to expose her relationship with Lucas. She didn't care about being labeled a homewrecker. She was only focused on securing her position. She wanted marriage, control over the Liu family shares and wealth. These were things Mr. and Mrs. Liu could have refused, but they didn't. For the sake of their unborn grandson, they chose to support her, sealing their own downfall. As for the sadistic caretaker, I didn't need to do anything. Lily chose him deliberately, just as she had in my previous life. She knew exactly what kind of person he was but still hired him to care for Lucas, ensuring that he suffered just as much as I had. Lucas's death was inevitable, and I only intervened at the last moment to call the police, making sure his suffering was documented. Lily's drug addiction wasn't news to me either. I had considered reporting her, but she spiraled out of control before I could act. Her overdose was a fitting end. Perhaps in the afterlife, she and Lucas could keep each other company. Meanwhile, my career continued to flourish. Under my leadership, the company reached unprecedented heights. My parents, with little else to occupy them, began pressuring me to marry and pursue a high-profile alliance. They wanted to dictate my future, but I refused. My father, feeling his authority challenged, tried to take back control of the company to teach me a lesson. But he quickly realized that everything had changed. His influence and reputation had long been eclipsed by mine. Many of the company's employees didn't even recognize him, and his orders carried no weight. First, he resisted reaching out to former partners and investors, only to be met with indifference. After facing repeated failures, he finally admitted defeat. He realized that I was no longer someone he could control. I was still his pride, but I had become something beyond his reach. This was exactly what I had worked so hard for in my previous life. Was my tragedy solely Lucas and Lily's fault? My parents had played a part too. They didn't actively harm me, but they abandoned me, cutting off my will to live. Sometimes silence can be just as culpable as violence. During those long years confined to my hospital bed, I realized that if I could position myself as someone indispensable, no one would dare to discard me, no matter what happened. Love, family, and friendship can all betray you, but power and status never will. In this new life, my goal had always been clear: abandon all unnecessary burdens and focus solely on building my empire.